Calvin Hayes was 42 years old, worked as a home health aide for an agency that paid him a modest $48,000 a year. And at precisely 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night that felt no different from 1,000 others, he was performing a task that had defined the last 4 years of his life. He was carrying his mother-in-law upstairs to bed. This was the 1,461st time he had done it. One lift for every single day, without fail, for 4 straight years. The number was seared into his mind, a silent tally he kept like a prisoner, marking days on a cell wall. His mother-in-law, Lorraine, was not a large woman, but at 160 pounds, she was a dead weight. Her 2016 stroke had left her left side mostly immobile, and her spirit curdled with a permanent simmering bitterness. Calvin's hands, calloused and strong, knew the exact points of leverage. One arm hooked securely under the bend of her knees, the other wrapped firmly around her back, his shoulder tucked just below her armpit. The technique was perfect, honed by years of repetition. It was the only way to navigate the narrow, suffocating staircase of their Park Heights row house, a building designed in an era when people were smaller and lives were simpler. "Watch my foot," Lorraine grumbled, her voice a dry rasp against his ear. Her left foot had bumped against the banister. It hadn't hurt her, she had little feeling there anyway, but it was a violation of the unspoken rule that her passage from the downstairs world to the upstairs world must be as smooth and untroubled as a queen being carried on a litter. "Sorry, Lorraine," Calvin murmured, his breath coming in controlled bursts. The muscles in his lower back, a complex network of knots and perpetually strained fibers, screamed in protest. He could feel a familiar, hot ache beginning to bloom just to the right of his spine. He spent at least $8 a month on a tube of extra-strength icy hot, a scent that now clung to him more persistently than any cologne. He took the stairs one at a time, his worn, $45 work boots finding their footing on the creaking wood. Each step was a small, calculated victory against gravity and fatigue. Below him, in the small living room, the blue light of the television flickered. His wife Denise was on the couch, a floral-patterned $60 fleece blanket pulled up to her chin, watching a reality show about impossibly wealthy women fighting in a restaurant. She didn't look up. She never did. The nightly ascent was as much a part of the house's soundscape as the hum of the old refrigerator or the rattle of the pipes when the heat kicked on. It was Calvin's job, a chore that had long ago shed any pretense of familial kindness and settled into the cold, hard category of expectation. He reached the top of the landing, his lungs burning. The small hallway was dark except for the dim glow of a $10 nightlight plugged into the wall, casting long, distorted shadows. He pivoted carefully, his body a finely tuned machine of strained ligaments, and maneuvered Lorraine through the doorway of her bedroom. The room smelled of lavender air freshener and the faint, medicinal tang of her various creams and pills. He gently, so gently, lowered her onto the edge of her bed, a sturdy oak frame they had bought for $800 4 years ago, right after the stroke. Her face, illuminated by the bedside lamp, was a mask of stern dissatisfaction. He straightened up, rolling his shoulders, trying to work out the immediate kink in his back. "You're breathing too loud," she said. It wasn't a complaint, it was a statement of fact, another of his many failings. "Sorry, Lorraine, here, Karins, Sarin Irin, sorry, Ori," he said again. It was his most used phrase in this house. He helped her swing her legs onto the bed and positioned the mountain of pillows behind her back. He handed her the remote for her own small television, a 19-inch Scepter that had cost $89 at Walmart, and the glass of water she insisted on having on her nightstand. The routine was immutable. "Is that everything?" he asked, his voice gentle. She didn't answer. She was already clicking through the channels, her focus absolute. He was dismissed. Calvin stood in the doorway for a moment, his hand on the frame. His deep brown skin was luminous, even in the dim light, but it was pulled taut over his cheekbones. He looked tired. He looked older than his 42 years. He turned and walked back down the stairs, the wood groaning under his weight, each step a descent back into a life that felt like it was shrinking around him, day by day, lift by lift. He had no idea that this familiar, crushing routine was about to be shattered by two simple words. And he had no idea that the silent tally he kept in his head was about to come to a sudden and final end. But tonight was not that night. Tonight was just Tuesday. Tonight was lift number 1460. What was he supposed to do? This was a question that plagued many, but for Calvin, it felt like a trap with no exit. Have you ever been in a situation where doing the right thing felt like it was slowly erasing you? Share your story in the comments below. We find strength in knowing we're not alone. The arrangement hadn't started as a life sentence. It had begun, as these things often do, with a crisis and a promise. 4 years ago, Lorraine had been at her own home, a slightly larger but equally aged row house in the same Park Heights neighborhood, when the stroke hit. The call had come to Denise at her job, a mid-level administrative position at a downtown law firm that paid her a respectable $65,000 a year. Calvin had been at his own job, helping an elderly client in Roland Park when Denise had called him, her voice tight with panic. The hospital vigil had been a blur of fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, and hushed conversations with doctors who spoke in acronyms. When the dust settled, the prognosis was clear. Lorraine had survived, but her life, and by extension theirs, was permanently altered. She could no longer live alone. The left side of her body was weak, her mobility was severely limited, and she would require constant daily assistance. The family meeting took place in a sterile, beige-colored conference room at the hospital. It consisted of Calvin, Denise, and Denise's brother, Marcus, a man who lived 2 hours away in Virginia, and whose contribution to the family was mostly limited to sending a $100 check on birthdays. "She can't come live with me," Marcus said immediately, his hands held up in surrender. "Janine and I, we just don't have the space. And with my travel schedule for work..." He let the sentence hang, the implication clear. His life was too important, too busy. All eyes turned to Denise. She wrung her hands, her expression a careful performance of sorrow and duty. "Of course she'll come live with us," she said, her voice catching theatrically. She placed a hand on Calvin's arm. "We'll make it work. Calvin is so good at this stuff. It's what he does for a living." Calvin felt a cold dread seep into his stomach. He loved his wife, but he knew this tone. This was the tone she used when she was volunteering him for something he didn't want to do. "Baby, you're strong," she'd said to him later that night as they cleared out their small guest room, packing away the boxes of old photo albums and winter clothes to make space for a hospital bed. "You can lift her, and you know all the exercises and things. It'll just be for a few months, until she gets her strength back. We'll save so much money not having to hire someone." The few months had bled into a year, then 2, then 4. Lorraine's strength never returned to the point of independence, and her will to try seemed to evaporate entirely. The temporary arrangement calcified into the permanent structure of their lives. Calvin's existence became a series of domestic duties, performed around the gravitational pull of Lorraine. He quit the agency he worked for, because the hours were too unpredictable. He took on a few private clients, people who needed help for a few hours here and there, piecing together an income that barely touched $48,000. It was less than he'd made before, but it gave him the flexibility their new life demanded. Their home, once a quiet sanctuary for two, became Lorraine's domain. Her medications lined the kitchen counter, a colorful arsenal of orange plastic bottles. Her walker was a permanent fixture in the living room, a metal tripod they were constantly tripping over. The television was always tuned to her game shows, the volume cranked to a deafening level. Calvin's life was a masterclass in domestic normalcy, a facade of routine that masked the slow-motion demolition of his own identity. He did the grocery shopping, his cart filled with the bland, low-sodium foods Lorraine required. Plain chicken breasts, $3.99 a pound, bags of frozen vegetables, $1.50 each, large canisters of oatmeal, $4. His weekly bill at the local ShopRite rarely exceeded $90 for the three of them. Meanwhile, Denise would come home from work, dropping a shopping bag from a downtown boutique on the kitchen table. Inside might be a new silk blouse for $150 or a pair of leather gloves that cost $80. Retail therapy, she'd say with a shrug. My boss was a nightmare today. He cooked every meal. He'd stand at the stove stirring a large pot of lentil soup that cost less than $10 to make and would provide 3 days of lunches, while Denise sat at the small kitchen table scrolling through her phone, showing him pictures of a $3,500 vacation package to Jamaica. Doesn't that look amazing? Maybe one day when things with Mama are more settled. He did the laundry, carefully washing Lorraine's delicate items separately. He mowed the tiny, postage stamp-sized lawn in the back. He was the one who dealt with the plumber when the ancient pipes in the basement finally gave out, a repair that cost them $650 from their dwindling joint savings account. He was the one who stayed up with Lorraine when a bad cough kept her awake all night, sitting in a hard-backed chair by her bed, listening to her labored breathing. His presence in the house had become functional. His possessions were confined to one side of the bedroom closet and a single nightstand. The walls were decorated with photos of Denise and her family. There were no pictures of Calvin's parents, who had passed away years ago. There was no space for his hobbies. His old woodworking tools gathered dust in a corner of the damp basement. The man he used to be, the man who liked to build things and go for long drives on weekends, had been subsumed by the caregiver. He was a ghost in his own home, his only tangible purpose manifesting at 8:47 p.m. each night when he transformed into a human crane to lift a woman who barely tolerated his existence. The accumulation of outrage was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, quiet layering of sediment, one cruel remark and dismissive gesture at a time, until the weight became unbearable. Each incident on its own was something a reasonable man could dismiss, something a loving husband could forgive. But together, they formed a mountain of disrespect that was slowly burying Calvin alive. The first truly deep cut came on their 10th wedding anniversary. Calvin had been planning it for weeks. He knew money was tight, or at least, that's what Denise always told him. So he didn't aim for extravagance. He wanted something thoughtful. He found a delicate, sterling silver locket at a small jewelry store in Hampton, paying $75 for it in cash he had saved by skipping lunches for a month. He cooked Denise's favorite meal, salmon with roasted asparagus and a lemon dill sauce. It cost him nearly $40, a significant splurge on their budget. He set the table with the good plates, the ones they never used, and lit 2 candles. When Denise walked in from work, she glanced at the table, her brow furrowed. "What's all this?" she asked, dropping her $2,400 Burberry trench coat over a chair. "Happy anniversary," Calvin said, his smile feeling fragile. Her face went blank for a beat too long. "Oh my God, is that today? Honey, I am so sorry. With everything going on with Mama, my mind is just a complete sieve." It totally slipped. From the living room, Lorraine's voice cut through the air like a shard of glass. "An anniversary is for a man to remember and a woman to enjoy. If she forgot, it's because you didn't make it memorable enough." Calvin felt the warmth in the room chill. Denise offered a weak, apologetic smile. "You know how she is?" She opened the small, wrapped box and looked at the locket. "Oh, it's Simple. It's nice. She put it on the counter, where it sat for the rest of the evening, forgotten. They ate the expensive salmon in near silence, the flickering candles illuminating a distance between them that felt wider than the small table. A few months later, his 2012 Toyota Camry, a car with 187,000 hard-earned miles on it, began making a terrible grinding noise. The mechanic at the local garage on Belvedere Avenue was blunt. Your transmission is shot. To rebuild it, you're looking at close to $1,000. Honestly, for a car this old, you should think about getting something else. Getting something else was an impossibility. A $1,000 repair was a catastrophe. That night, he approached Denise as she was balancing her checkbook. "The car needs a new transmission," he said, the words tasting like ash. "It's going to be about $900. She sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. "900? Calvin, where are we supposed to get that kind of money?" "What about the joint savings?" he asked. They were supposed to put a little away each month. "It's gone," she said, not looking at him. "I had to get Mama a new pressure relief cushion for her chair. The Deluxe gel one the therapist recommended, it was $600. And her new supplements from the holistic place, those were another $200. They aren't cheap, you know." He knew he should let it go, but a strange, bitter curiosity pushed him. A week later, while looking for a stamp in her desk drawer, he saw a credit card statement peeking out from under a pile of papers. His eyes scanned the line items. He saw the $600 charge for the medical supply store. But right below it was another charge, from the same day. Tranquil Waters Spa and Salon, $450. The transaction description read, "Girls' Day Out package for two." He felt a wave of cold fury, followed immediately by a familiar, weary resignation. He put the statement back, closed the drawer, and said nothing. He ended up borrowing the $900 from his own brother, a loan that felt like a profound humiliation. The verbal cuts came just as frequently, and often in public. Calvin was meticulous about Lorraine's care. He took her to every doctor's appointment, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the hospital, advocating for her, taking detailed notes. During one checkup, her primary care physician, a kind man named Dr. Evans, reviewed her chart and examined her limbs. "Her muscle tone is holding up remarkably well, considering," he said, looking at Calvin with genuine admiration. "You're doing an amazing job with her physical therapy, Mr. Hayes. Truly, this level of maintenance at home is rare and commendable." Calvin felt a flush of pride. It was a rare acknowledgement of his tireless, unseen work. He helped Lorraine back into her wheelchair and took her down to the car. She was unusually silent on the drive back to Park Heights. The moment they were inside the house, she called for Denise. "That Dr. Evans is a fool," Lorraine announced, her voice dripping with disdain. "He just wants to get his copay and rush us out the door. He didn't even listen to my heart properly." She then gestured a weak, trembling hand toward Calvin. "And this one," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "he's too rough with me. I think he enjoys it when I'm in pain. Today, in the car, he nearly dropped me getting me in. He's careless." Calvin stared at her, his mouth agape. It was a shocking, blatant lie. He had transferred her into the car with the same painstaking care he always used. Denise looked from her mother's aggrieved face to Calvin's stunned one. She patted her mother's hand. "Now, Mama, I'm sure he didn't mean to. You have to be more careful, Calvin. She's fragile." She didn't defend him. She didn't question the lie. She simply accepted her mother's narrative, repositioning him as the one at fault. The ultimate devaluation, however, came during a small family get-together for Easter. Denise's auntie and a few cousins came over. Calvin had spent 2 days cooking. He'd made a baked ham, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, and a sweet potato pie from scratch. He was shuttling between the kitchen and the living room, serving plates, refilling glasses, the gracious host who was also the unpaid caterer. Denise's Auntie Rose, a large, warm woman with a booming laugh, took a bite of the macaroni and cheese. Mmm, Calvin, you put your foot in this. You are a saint from heaven for what you do for Lorraine and this whole family. Before Calvin could even offer a modest thank you, Lorraine scoffed from her specialized armchair, a sound like tearing paper. A saint? It's the least he can do. He lives here rent-free, doesn't he? The air in the room thickened. The cousins suddenly found their shoes fascinating. Denise, seeing the awkwardness, jumped in with a brittle, bright laugh. "Mama, be nice," she chirped. But then she turned to Auntie Rose and added, "But you know she does have a point. It's a team effort. We all chip in around here." A team effort. With those 3 words, Denise and her mother had reframed 4 years of his life. 1,460 lifts, thousands of meals cooked, countless hours of cleaning, driving, and patient care. It was not a sacrifice. It was not an act of love. It was rent. He was not a husband, not a son-in-law, not a caregiver. He was a tenant paying his way with his body and his time. He looked at his wife, who smiled at him as if she had just smoothed everything over, and he felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. The outrage had accumulated. The foundation of his life in that house had been eroded to dust. All it would take was one more tremor for the whole structure to collapse. The tremor came on a rainy Tuesday night in October. The day had been long and dreary, the sky a uniform, depressing shade of gray. Rain had been falling since morning, a steady, miserable drizzle that seeped into the bones and dampened the spirit. Calvin felt it in his back, a low, throbbing ache that was his constant companion. He went through the evening routine with an almost robotic efficiency. He served dinner, a simple chicken and rice soup. He cleaned the kitchen, wiping down the counters until they shone under the harsh fluorescent light. He sat through an hour of a game show where contestants screamed with joy over winning a $1,500 living room set. At 8:47 p.m., Eddie Coriem, he performed the lift. It was number 1,463. The rain lashed against the windows as he ascended the stairs, a rhythmic patter that seemed to count out his steps. He settled Lorraine into her bed, adjusted her pillows, and handed her the remote. She was already engrossed in a late-night talk show, and he was dismissed without a word. He walked back down to the main floor. Denise was already getting ready for bed, having announced she was exhausted. The house was quiet, except for the drumming of the rain and the muffled sound of 2 different television shows from 2 different floors. Calvin walked into the narrow hallway, where a small, rickety desk served as the household's administrative center. It was cluttered with bills, junk mail, and Denise's work papers. On top of the pile sat the caregiver's logbook. It was a simple black and white composition notebook, the kind you could buy for $1. It was their official record for Lorraine's long-term care insurance policy. The policy, which Lorraine had wisely purchased years before her stroke, provided a monthly stipend of $2,200 to help with the costs of her care. The stipend was contingent on her being cared for at home by a designated primary caregiver. That caregiver, as stipulated in the policy rider, was Calvin. His sole responsibility, according to the insurance company, was to sign and date the logbook every single night, confirming he had provided care that day. Usually, Denise would bring the book to him to sign, and then she'd put it away in the desk drawer. But tonight, in her exhaustion, she had left it lying open. Calvin picked up the pen to sign for the day. His signature was the last thing he did before he could finally rest. As he leaned over, his eyes fell on the previous day's entry. It had his signature, Calvin Hayes, and the date. But next to it, in Lorraine's distinctive spidery handwriting, were two words he had never noticed before: helper only. His breath caught in his chest. He blinked, thinking the dim light was playing tricks on him. He leaned closer. The handwriting was shaky but clear. Helper only. A strange coldness, entirely separate from the damp chill of the evening, began to spread through him. His heart started a low, heavy thumping against his ribs. He slowly, almost reverently, turned the page back to the week before. There it was again. His signature, the date, and next to it, penned in blue ink. Helper only. His hands trembled slightly as he began to flip backward through the book. Page after page. It was the same story. A week ago. A month ago. 6 months ago. A year ago. The ink color changed from blue to black and back again. The penmanship wavered in its firmness, but the message was brutally, damningly consistent. Every single night for 4 years, after he had signed his name to validate his role as her state-sanctioned caregiver, his mother-in-law had added her own private, disqualifying asterisk. For the insurance company, whose $2,200 check arrived like clockwork every month into an account that only Denise and Lorraine controlled, he was the primary caregiver. It was his name on the policy rider, his labor that justified the payment. But in this book, in the secret history of their lives written by his mother-in-law, his role was diminished, demoted. He was not family. He was not a son. He was not even a caregiver. He was the help, a hired hand who just happened to live there. The rain streaked down the glass of the nearby window, blurring the lights from the street outside. The clock on the wall, a cheap plastic one from a dollar store, ticked loudly in the silence. The second hand swept past the 12. It was 9:06 p.m. Calvin stood there, the open book in his hands, and felt an unnerving calm settle over him. It wasn't the hot rage he might have expected. It was a terrifying, crystalline clarity. The 1,000 little cuts, the 1,000 dismissive gestures, and casual cruelties of the past 4 years suddenly coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. He saw the anniversary locket on the counter. He felt the humiliation of borrowing money for his car. He heard Lorraine's lie to the doctor. He heard her declare his service as rent. And now this secret, nightly ritual of erasure. He closed the book gently, the soft thud of the cardboard cover sounding like a gavel in the quiet hall. He had been a fool, a willing, complicit fool. He had traded his life, his body, and his spirit for a place in a family that considered him nothing more than a servant. And they had been cashing the checks on his back the entire time. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, and in that moment, Calvin felt that something inside him was being washed clean too. His love, his loyalty, his obligation. They were all gone, leaving behind only a cold, hard resolve. The man who woke up at 5:30 a.m. the next morning was not the same man who had carried his mother-in-law up the stairs the night before. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Calvin moved with the same quiet efficiency, his motions ingrained by years of routine. He started the coffee maker, a Mr. Coffee that cost $25 and was now stained brown from overuse. He measured out the oatmeal for Lorraine's breakfast, but inside, a silent, seismic shift had occurred. The part of him that had absorbed the slights, that had made excuses, that had always chosen to keep the peace, was gone. In its place was a man playing a role, a strategist, biding his time. Denise came into the kitchen, already dressed for work in a sharp $300 navy blue pantsuit. She was applying her lipstick, a shade of bright red that cost $38 a tube, using the reflection in the microwave door. "Morning, baby," she said, her voice distracted. Can you make sure you do Mama's physical therapy exercises today? The ones for her left arm? I think you've been slacking on them a little. The old Calvin would have felt a sting of injustice. The old Calvin would have defended himself, listing the times he had done the exercises that week. The new Calvin simply nodded, his face a placid mask. "Of course," he said, his voice perfectly even. "I'll take care of it." She kissed his cheek, a fleeting, dry peck that smelled of expensive perfume. "You're the best. I don't know what we'd do without you." The dramatic irony of her statement was so thick he could have choked on it. He just smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He spent the day performing his duties with a chilling precision. He helped Lorraine get dressed. He administered her morning medications. He served her breakfast. He sat with her while she watched her shows, not really seeing the screen, his mind a whirring engine of calculation. He was an actor in the final performance of a long-running play, and he knew all his lines. While Lorraine was taking her afternoon nap, he went down to the damp, musty basement. In a metal filing cabinet, rusted at the corners, was a folder labeled Mama's Insurance. He'd seen Denise put it there years ago. He opened the drawer, the metal screeching in protest. He found the folder easily. Inside was the original long-term care policy. He carefully removed the pages, his heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. He found the rider he was looking for. There it was, in crisp, corporate font. Designated primary caregiver, Calvin Hayes, spouse. His next move was critical. He couldn't use the printer in the house. Denise would see the print history. He took his phone and with hands that were surprisingly steady, he took clear, well-lit photographs of the policy writer. Then he went back upstairs to the hallway desk. The logbook was back in its drawer. He took it out. He opened it to a random page from the previous year, smoothed it flat, and took a picture. Helper only. He did it again for a page from 2 years ago, and one from the very first month. He now had a small, damning collection of digital evidence stored securely on his phone. He told Denise he had a toothache and needed to go to the dentist, an excuse that wouldn't raise any suspicion. It bought him 3 hours of freedom. He didn't go to a dentist. He drove his rattling Camry not to a clinic, but to a branch of the public library. There, for 10 cents a page, he printed the photographs from his phone. The black and white copies looked stark and official. The words primary caregiver and helper only seemed to leap off the page. He knew he couldn't fight this battle on emotion. He needed to understand the mechanics of his situation. He had a name, given to him by a friend who had gone through a messy divorce, Maria Reyes, a lawyer at a non-profit legal aid society in downtown Baltimore. They offered free 30-minute consultations. He had called from the library parking lot, and by a stroke of luck, they had a cancellation for that very afternoon. Sitting across from Maria in her small, cluttered office, Calvin laid out the printed pages on her desk. She was a sharp, no-nonsense black woman in her 50s, her hair in elegant twists, her eyes missing nothing. She listened intently as he told her the story of the last 4 years, his voice low and devoid of self-pity. He wasn't there for sympathy. He was there for information. She examined the insurance rider, then the copies of the logbook pages. She let out a low whistle. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "This is audacious." "What does it mean?" Calvin asked. "Legally?" "It means a few things," she began, her tone shifting from empathetic listener to sharp legal analyst. "First, and most obviously, they have been treating you with a complete lack of respect. But from a contractual standpoint, this is a hornet's nest. Your name on this rider makes you the linchpin of this entire financial arrangement. The $2,200 monthly payment is predicated on the care you provide and document. Their little side note, this helper-only business, is their attempt to have it both ways. To cash the check that your status as caregiver provides, while privately diminishing your role to that of an employee. She leaned forward. Frankly, this is insurance fraud. If the company saw this logbook, they could argue the terms of the policy were being misrepresented. They could launch an investigation and potentially try to claw back every dime they've paid out. That's over $100,000. Calvin absorbed this, his face impassive. "I don't want to sue them," he said quietly. "I don't want their money. I just want it to stop." "Then your path is very simple," Maria said. "The policy is contingent on you. If you are no longer the caregiver, the condition for payment is no longer being met. You simply have to inform the insurance company formally that you have ceased your duties." "And what happens then?" "The benefits will be suspended immediately," she stated. "They will put a hold on all payments pending a full review. They would have to reapply with a new caregiver, which could be a family member or a licensed professional from an agency. That process can take months, with no guarantee of approval, especially if any red flags come up." She tapped the copy of the logbook page. "And this is a very, very big red flag." She did a quick calculation on a notepad. At the standard agency rate for a home health aide, let's call it a conservative $30 an hour. For 8 hours of work a day, 7 days a week, you have provided approximately $350,000 in unpaid labor over the past 4 years. The number hung in the air between them, $350,000. It was an abstraction, a figure so large it felt unreal. It was the price of his life. It was the value of his back, his time, his spirit. And it was all the validation he needed. He had been playing dumb, but now he had a plan. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He chose Friday. A Friday gave them the weekend to feel the full, immediate weight of his absence before the business week began, before they could even start making calls to agencies or the insurance company. It was a small, strategic cruelty, and he embraced it. The day was excruciatingly normal. He made the beds. He did the laundry. He went to the grocery store and bought food for the weekend, knowing he wouldn't be there to cook it. The act felt like a final, quiet betrayal, and a strange sense of liberation washed over him as he placed a $12 package of pork chops in the cart. He drove Lorraine to a physical therapy appointment, his face a perfect mask of calm concern. He listened as the therapist praised his consistency. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," she said. "Her range of motion is stable." He brought Lorraine home, served her a late lunch, and sat with her while she napped in her chair. Denise came home at 5:30 p.m., complaining about traffic on the Jones Falls Expressway. She was in a good mood. A big case at her firm had settled, and bonuses were rumored to be coming. "Maybe we can finally take that trip to Jamaica," she said, kicking off her $250 heels. Calvin just grunted in response. He cooked their dinner, baked chicken, roasted potatoes, and green beans. He served the plates. He ate his own meal in silence, the food tasteless in his mouth. He cleared the table and washed the dishes, his hands moving in the warm, soapy water with a practiced grace. Every action was deliberate, final. He was saying goodbye to the sink. He was saying goodbye to the worn linoleum floor. He was saying goodbye to the man he had been in this house. At 8:45 p.m., the familiar routine was set to begin. Denise was curled on the couch, scrolling through social media on her new $1,200 iPhone. Lorraine was in her specialized armchair, the credits rolling on her favorite game show. "All right, Mama, time for bed," Denise said, her eyes still glued to the screen. "Calvin will take you up." From her side table, Lorraine picked up the small, polished brass bell she used to summon him and rang it twice. The sharp, clear ding-ding echoed in the small room. It was the sound of command. It was the sound that had ruled his evenings for 4 years. Calvin walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He stopped in the center of the living room, a few feet from Lorraine's chair. He looked at his mother-in-law, her face expectant and impatient. Then he looked at his wife, who hadn't even bothered to look up from her phone. "No," he said. The word was not loud. It was not angry. It was a simple, flat statement of fact. It dropped into the cozy domestic silence like a stone into a still pond. Denise looked up, her brow furrowed in annoyance. "What do you mean, no? It's her bedtime. She needs to go up." "I mean, I'm not carrying her," Calvin said, his voice as calm and steady as a surgeon's hand. He met her gaze. "My back hurts." Lorraine's face darkened with indignation. "What is this nonsense?" she snapped, her voice cracking with authority. "Stop playing around and do your job. I pay for you to be here." And there it was. The truth, as she saw it. He wasn't family. He was an employee. An employee she felt she paid. "No, you don't," Calvin said quietly, the devastating precision of his words cutting through her bluster. "The insurance company pays for my services, and the policy is contingent on me being the primary caregiver." He took a small breath. "As of 9 o'clock tonight, which is in 10 minutes, I am no longer your caregiver. My services are no longer available." Denise's jaw dropped. She sat bolt upright, the fleece blanket sliding to the floor. "Calvin, what are you talking about? You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet finality in his tone was more powerful than any shout. He turned his back on their stunned, disbelieving faces and walked toward the bedroom he and Denise shared. He didn't bother with the clothes in the closet. His preparations had been made in secret. Under the bed were 2 black duffel bags, a $300 set he had purchased at Marshall's 2 days prior. They contained everything he needed: a few changes of clothes, his toiletries, the important documents he had gathered, and the small shoebox that held the few mementos of his parents. He slung one bag over each shoulder, walked out of the bedroom, and headed for the front door. He passed directly by them. Lorraine's face was a mottled canvas of fury and confusion. Denise was pale, her eyes wide with a dawning panic. "Calvin, wait!" she cried, scrambling off the couch. "You can't just leave. What are we supposed to do?" He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. He looked back at her, the woman he had loved, the woman for whom he had sacrificed his own life. "I guess you'll have to figure that out," he said. "You're the one who manages the household." He didn't know he had that cruelty in him. It was a verbatim callback to what Lorraine had said on their anniversary, and it left his lips before he could stop it. Then he opened the door, stepped out into the cool night air, and closed it gently behind him. He did not slam it. He did not look back. He walked down the 3 concrete steps to the sidewalk and got into his old, noisy Toyota Camry. He turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. His phone began to ring before he had even reached the corner of their block. The screen glowed with Denise's name. He ignored it. He drove, heading toward a cheap, anonymous motel by the BWI airport, a $79 a night place that promised clean sheets and no questions. As he merged onto the highway, the phone rang again and again. Then a text message notification chimed. Then another. A frantic, digital cascade of consequence had begun, but he just kept driving, the city lights blurring in his rearview mirror like a life he was finally leaving behind. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, a direct and predictable consequence of their own actions. Calvin, sitting on the edge of a lumpy bed in a room that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, listened to the voicemails pile up, each one a station on their journey from arrogance to desperation. He didn't listen to them in real time. He let them accumulate, a testament to the chaos he had unleashed by simply withdrawing his labor. The next morning, with a cup of lukewarm coffee from the motel lobby in his hand, he played them back, a clinical observer of the life he had just detonated. The first was from Denise, timed at 9:05 p.m., just moments after he left. Her voice was sharp, laced with anger and disbelief. "Calvin, what the hell was that? Some kind of joke? Get back here right now. Mama is waiting." The second came 10 minutes later, at 9:15 p.m. The anger was gone, replaced by the high, thin wire of panic. "This isn't funny. I can't lift her by myself. Her medication is upstairs. Calvin, answer your phone. Call me." A full half hour passed before the next one, at 9:45 p.m. Her voice was strained, tight with humiliation. "I had to call Marcus, my brother. I had to call him and beg him to drive all the way from his house to help me get our mother into her bed. Do you know how humiliating that is? What is wrong with you?" The fourth voicemail was the most venomous. It was logged at 10:30 p.m. from Denise's phone, but the voice was Lorraine's, screeching and distorted with rage. "You ungrateful boy, after everything we've done for you, letting you live in my house, eating my food, you'll be sorry for this. You'll come crawling back, you hear me? You have nothing." He deleted it without a second thought. The final message came the next morning, Saturday, at 7 a.m. Denise's voice was completely different. It was stripped of its anger and pride. It was the wheedling, pleading voice of someone who had stared into the abyss of her new reality and been terrified by what she saw. "Calvin, please just come home. We can talk about this. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Whatever it is, we can fix it. I have to go to work on Monday. I can't lose my job over this. Please, just call me." He deleted that one too. On Monday morning, at 9:01 a.m., he made his own call. He dialed the toll-free number for the long-term care insurance company. He navigated the automated menu and was connected to a case manager named Sharon. "Good morning. You've reached the office of Sharon Davis. How can I help you?" "Good morning, Sharon," Calvin said, his voice calm and professional. "My name is Calvin Hayes. I'm calling in reference to policy number 774-B-91 for the beneficiary Lorraine Miller." He heard the click of a keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, I see the policy here. You're listed as the primary caregiver. How can I assist you?" "I am formally notifying you," Calvin stated, using the precise language his legal aid lawyer had advised, "that as of Friday, October 12th, at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, I have permanently ceased all duties as the primary caregiver for Lorraine Miller. I will not be resuming this role under any circumstances." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, Sharon cleared her throat. "Oh, I see. Thank you for the notification, Mr. Hayes. Per the terms of the policy, we will have to suspend all benefit payments, effective immediately, pending a full review of the care situation." "I understand," Calvin said. "Thank you for your time." He hung up. The $2,200 monthly payment, the financial engine that had powered their household and enabled Denise's lifestyle, had been shut off. The consequences began to cascade, each one a falling domino in the life they had built on his back. First came the immediate, crushing financial blow. Denise, desperate to get to her job, had to hire an emergency aide from an agency. The agency, sensing her desperation, charged a premium rate, $45 per hour. The first full day of care cost her $360, more than she could comfortably afford, charged directly to her credit card. Second, the impact on her career was swift. She couldn't leave her mother alone, and she couldn't afford round-the-clock care. She burned through her remaining vacation and sick days in less than 2 weeks. Then she was forced to apply for unpaid leave under the Family and Medical Leave Act, a move that protected her job but slashed her income to zero. Her boss was not pleased. The rumored bonus vanished. Third, the search for a long-term solution became a nightmare. They discovered the true market value of Calvin's labor. A reputable agency quoted them nearly $6,000 a month for the 24/7 on-call level of care he had been providing for free. They were laughed at when they tried to find an independent aide willing to do the work for what the insurance had paid. The $2,200 a month that had seemed like a windfall was, they now realized, a pittance. Fourth, the house itself became a prison. The two-story row house, once a symbol of family stability, was now an architectural trap. Lorraine was effectively stranded on the first floor, sleeping on a rented hospital bed in the middle of the living room. They got a quote to have a stair lift installed. The price was $7,800 with a 6-week waiting list. It was money they simply did not have. Fifth, the inevitable happened. After a month of chaos, debt, and desperation, they were forced to sell the house. They took the first lowball cash offer they received, desperate to liquidate. The Park Heights home sold for $140,000. After real estate commissions, closing costs, and paying off the small remaining mortgage, they were left with less than $120,000. It felt like a fortune, but it would be consumed with terrifying speed. Their only viable option was to move Lorraine into a long-term care facility. They found a state-subsidized nursing home in Towson. It was clean but relentlessly sterile, a place of beige walls, the smell of bleach, and the low murmurs of television sets. The cost, even after Lorraine's Social Security was applied, was over $4,000 a month, eating away at the proceeds from the house sale at an alarming rate. The final, most devastating blow came from the insurance company. During the benefits review, Denise, in a foolish attempt to prove a history of consistent care, submitted the logbooks. She didn't understand the legal poison they contained. The claims adjuster saw page after page of Calvin's signature next to Lorraine's handwritten addendum, helper only. The discrepancy triggered an immediate fraud investigation. The company's legal department sent a letter informing them that the payments for the past 4 years, a sum of $105,600, had been made under what appeared to be false pretenses. The letter strongly suggested that they would be seeking full repayment. The foundation had not just collapsed, the ground beneath it had opened up and swallowed them whole. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the large, clean windows of a cheerful, craftsman-style house in Baltimore's Hamilton neighborhood. The light illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air and cast a warm glow on the polished hardwood floors. In the bright, spacious kitchen, Calvin Hayes was helping an elderly man named George with his breakfast. Calvin looked like a different person. The perpetual tension in his shoulders was gone. The weary lines around his eyes had softened. He had lost the haunted, tired look and replaced it with a quiet, confident calm. He moved with a relaxed purpose, his deep brown skin radiant in the sunlight. After leaving the motel, he had used his small savings to enroll in a 6-week Certified Nursing Assistant (CNA) program. He had thrown himself into the work, his years of hands-on experience giving him a huge advantage. He graduated at the top of his class. Armed with his new certification, he was immediately hired by a premium home care agency, the kind that catered to wealthy families in Roland Park and Guilford. His starting salary was $58,000 a year, but with his willingness to take on weekend and overtime shifts, he was on track to clear over $70,000. More importantly, he was treated with professional respect. He was no longer the help. He was Mr. Hayes, the highly regarded CNA. His first major purchase had been a reliable vehicle. He sold the old dying Camry for $500 in scrap and put a down payment on a certified pre-owned 2018 Ford Transit Connect van. It cost him $22,000, a sum that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The van was practical and professional, with plenty of room for a client's wheelchair or walker. It was a symbol of his new, self-sufficient life. His current client, Mr. George, was a retired history professor from Johns Hopkins, a widower with a sharp mind and a kind heart. His children had hired Calvin to provide companionship and assistance a few days a week. "You know, Calvin," Mr. George said, peering over his glasses as he ate his toast, "my late wife, Eleanor, she used to say that a person's true character is revealed by how they treat those they don't have to be nice to." Calvin smiled. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," George said softly. "She would have liked you." On the refrigerator, held by a colorful magnet, was a child's drawing. It was from Mr. George's 8-year-old grandson. It depicted two figures holding hands under a smiling sun. One was tall with gray scribbled hair labeled Grandpa. The other was a bit shorter with a kind face labeled Calvin. The boy had used a brown crayon for Calvin's smiling face and arms. It was a simple, innocent drawing, but it filled Calvin with a warmth that was more profound than any praise. One afternoon, the mail brought a thick manila envelope. It was from a law office. Inside were divorce papers filed by Denise. He wasn't surprised. He had expected it. Tucked inside the legal documents was a single sheet of notebook paper folded in half. It was a handwritten note from her. "I hope you're happy," it read. "Mama is in a home. The house is gone. It's all your fault." He read the words, feeling not anger, not sadness, but a distant, clinical pity. She still didn't get it. She never would. She saw his departure as the cause of her problems, not the consequence of her own choices. He folded the note, walked over to the kitchen trash can, and dropped it inside. He signed the divorce papers that same day and mailed them back. He felt nothing but relief. He had spent 4 years carrying the physical and emotional weight of 2 women who saw him as a tool. He had mistaken obligation for love and service for family. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been a liberation. It had forced him to see his own worth, a value that couldn't be quantified by a fraudulent insurance check or diminished by a cruel, secret note in a logbook. The world doesn't pay you what you're worth. It pays you what you negotiate. And for years, he had negotiated his value down to nothing. Now, he set his own terms. His wealth wasn't measured in a rent-free room or a seat at a resentful family's table. True wealth was the quiet hum of his van's engine, the respect of his clients, the freedom of his own choices, and the profound peace of a quiet morning in a sunlit kitchen. He had carried a burden for 1,463 days. Now he was finally, blessedly, light. The most important relationship we have is the one with ourselves. Learning to set boundaries isn't an act of selfishness. It's an act of self-preservation. Calvin's story is a powerful reminder that your value is inherent and non-negotiable. If you've ever had to walk away to find your worth, let us know in the comments. Your story might be the light someone else needs to find their own path. Thank you for watching Love Beyond Pride.